I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Lakeville Historical Society. We haven't been able to hold too many meetings lately, but it's good to see we're back in business. Okay, what our normal procedure is to do our speaker first, and then we do refreshments, and then we do our business meeting. So that's what we'll do today. Okay? So I'm the speaker, and I'm Brian Reynolds. If anyone doesn't know me, who knows? All right. Now, I'm going to talk about the Lakeville Hospital. Lakeville Hospital started off as a state sanatorium for people with TB. At the time, it opened in 1910, and at the time, people who lived around the neighborhood or in the town or anywhere nearby didn't want TB hospitals or sanatoriums near where they lived. So in the old days, almost everybody lived on the grounds, and they rarely ever left the grounds because everybody thought they would be carrying TB, which was true. Many people who worked there did get the disease and became patients there. So, Dr. Sumner Coolidge of Watertown, who was a Harvard graduate, he started the whole activity of having a sanitarium in Lakeville. First, he wanted to put it in Middleborough. Middleborough didn't want it, so we got it in Lakeville. Dr. Coolidge had been one of the people who worked on the Panama Canal on viruses and mosquitoes and I guess yellow fever and that sort of thing. And he took the lead on this. All right, the property way back at the time of the Revolutionary War was owned by Simeon Doggett. And so they tore down Simeon Doggett's house, and after that, it was owned by Andrew Jackson Shockley. So when we get to 1910 or thereabouts, there was a committee that organized and sold the property to the state, and they were Fred Shockley, A. Davis, and Mr. Ashley. The hospital closed in 1992. The buildings were renamed in 1963 from being a sanitarium to a hospital. In 1964, the building that you see in the front of the hospital, the big brick building which looks like it's 4 stories high, opened. All right? Before that, I had worked in the other older buildings, so I got to go through a lot of it. And I also worked in the newer building. And so it was, now when it closed, the records and artifacts were moved to a hospital in Tewksbury, okay? And there they had storage and I think a museum from all the hospitals and state institutions that had closed. State used to have these places called state schools, and they housed the people who were mentally challenged. Okay, so at Lakeville we got a lot of patients from those facilities that needed orthopedic care and orthopedic surgery. So I saw a lot of people with a lot of different problems, and they needed help, and the Lakeville Hospital did a fine job of providing them with care. Now, the types of people that were there had these kind of problems. I may have this a little bit wrong. Spina bifida, okay? Cerebral palsy, arthrogryposis.
Don't know that one.
Well, joints fuse. Hydrocephalics,
Okay.
they had large heads. Microcephalics, they had small heads. Leg perthes, clubfoot, arthritis, and muscular dystrophy, and many other conditions that some of them I can't pronounce. And they all came there from the outside and from the state schools and other state institutions and got health care they needed. And it worked out quite well. Okay, about along about, I don't know, 1990 something, Governor William Weld and his people closed the old Lakeville Hospital. That most of the buildings that he closed were from 1964. And so once it closed, they closed it without shutting off the water, so all the pipes froze, and it was a mess. So moving on, it eventually got purchased by National Development Company, I believe, and then Derek Maxey became the owner, and in recent years it's been Rhino Capital. So those are, so now they had, in the old days at Clear Pond, they got the water supply for the hospital. There was a pumping station at Clear Pond on the east side with brick walls, and they pumped the water to a water tower that was back on the hospital grounds, and it was gravity fed down from there. Along about 1955, there was a nurse who used to write letters to the Boston newspapers. She was an LPN, and she would write and ask for a shower of cards. And it was both boys and girls that got cards, and usually it would be 5 or 6 cards. Well, this one time, it went national and international, okay? Within a couple of weeks, they filled 5 rooms, floor to ceiling, with things for the boy that she wrote the letter for, the last letter. She didn't do it after that. They threatened to fire her. Okay, so the boy's name was Francis, and he was known as Francis X. I don't think we can give his last name out of privacy considerations. Okay, so that year, I think it was 55, the Jerry Lewis was chairman of the Muscular Dystrophy Fund Drive, and he heard about it, and he organized a closed-circuit TV program which lasted about 3 hours from Los Angeles to Lakeville. In those days, there weren't any satellites. The signal got transmitted from tower to tower, and he got the towers all cleared from one side of the country to the other, and he had famous people from Hollywood appear in front of Francis X in the auditorium at Lakeville Hospital. And this, of course, made him very happy, and as a result, he became the poster child for muscular dystrophy for that year. It would be nice to get a copy of the poster or a photograph of the poster. Never seen it. If anyone knows how to find one or more information, it would be nice. Okay? Now, Francis was at the hospital because his father was in the Korean War, and he got shot in the head. Okay? But he lived, and he came back, and he had 4 or 5 sons and 1 daughter, and all of his sons had muscular dystrophy, and that's why Francis was there. Well, he blamed his wife. It wasn't his fault, it was his wife's fault. Quite simple. So he shot her in the head. You know, what is he supposed to do? Sorry. Not funny, I know. So Francis and his brothers and his sister, they all got put into state institutions. His father got put into a facility in Bridgewater, which used to be called the State Farm. And now it's a facility for criminally insane or something like that. And he was there for the rest of his life. Now, okay, he the nurse and somebody else went to visit his father one year, and he said he had never had any visitors, and that he had frequent nosebleeds. So he was very glad to have somebody come and see him after, like, I don't know, a 15-year gap or something, maybe 10-year gap. And so he never left that institution after that, and he died there. Now, if you want to see a picture of Francis, there is a book, Berkeley, Freetown, and Lakeville, by Gail Terry. There is a picture of Francis X in the book when he was at the closed-circuit TV program in the auditorium, and he looked very happy. Now, moving on, if you were coming up from Middleborough, approaching the area of the Lakeville Hospital, there was a back entrance, and it went into the area that I would call the support area for the hospital. There was a warehouse, there was a men's dorm, there were garages for the trucks, there was an ambulance, and there was a garage for the ambulance, and sheds and other kinds of structures in back there. Then you would pass that, and there was a front entrance, or the main entrance. And as you went into the main entrance, on the right was the boiler plant, where they made the steam and they generated electricity when the power went out, and they generated DC power. And they had separate outlets so they could run lights in the buildings and keep things running, like the iron lungs for the people that had polio. Okay, and to the left of that was a grassy area that looked nice, and then you'd move on, and on your right would be the CP ward, which was also called the East Ward. It was a wooden building, and it held the patients, usually fairly young children, who had cerebral palsy. It was, a place they needed to go. They tried to help them. On the left was the men's ward. I worked in the men's ward. And, upstairs, there were living quarters for people. Okay? Then there was a cross street. And if you went south, you would end up at a building called the South Pavilion. Now, in the South Pavilion were babies. There might have been 20 or 30 cribs. And most of the children had things like spina bifida. Their backs didn't close as they were developing as, to babies. And you could see the inside of their spines. Really sad. Most of them didn't live long. And there was an addition onto the South Pavilion called the Cottage. Now, behind the Cottage was the building called the Superintendent's House. You see it from Main Street. It's a sort of large white house, and it was allegedly brought in on sections on trucks and lifted into place. And so that was probably Lakeville's first modular house. And it's still there today. Then, at that intersection, if you turned right, the building was called the North Pavilion. And in later years, that originally held patients, but in later years, the OT, occupational therapy shop, was there, and the school. The school was downstairs, and upstairs was the OT shop. And patients went there and did arts and crafts, and they were very happy. Okay. The main building was next on your left, and that was the administration building. And in the bottom of it, there was a kitchen and a bakery. Bakery was wonderful, and really good what they produced there. And so the upper floors, the top floor was living quarters for employees, and the middle layers were offices, and somewhere along the way inside there was dining rooms. Now the people up in the higher ranked people had their own dining room, and I think there were 6 other kinds of dining rooms for people of lesser grade, and the lowest level were the people that worked outdoors, then the nursing assistants, and the LPNs, and the RNs, and other grades in between. Now the people that were in the top grade, they had a silver tea set, which nobody else got. And they also got cut flowers every day, which was quite nice. Now, the next building was on the right. It was called surgery. And in the surgery, of course, they did, that's where they took care of people and did the operations. And off to the side inside, there was a room called the plaster room. After they did the orthopedic surgery, they would stabilize the area and put a plaster cast on the patient so they wouldn't damage the surgery. And there was an x-ray room. I went there many times with patients, and a medical supply room. I remember the ladies that ran that, there was a Miss Hodder and a Mrs. Crowninshield, and they ran that. Now that building was built in the 1930s. It was stucco, and it's still there today. They haven't torn it down yet, I don't believe. Okay, now moving on, you go a little further straight ahead from the intersection, and you would, on your right would be the water tower. It was about 100 feet high, and it was probably dates from the 1920s or something. Who knows? There's some of the parts of it are at the Lakeville Museum. One of the few things we got, the contractor donated to us when he took it down. Okay, and then there was a little rotary ahead. The little rotary you could still see. You could drive your car around it today, probably. On your left was the women's ward. That also had living quarters for employees above it. And I also worked in that building. One of my jobs was to lift people in and out of bed onto stretchers or gurneys or into wheelchairs, back and forth. Get them up in the morning, get them back in bed at night. And so I was busy. Okay, now over on the right-hand side as you went down that road, there was the children's ward, built about 1930. It was also a stucco building, and there's a picture of it up here on the table. That's the building that Francis X was in. On the front of the building, there is like ceramic artwork. And I've been trying to get that saved for a number of years. And I've even, you know, a group of us have talked to the contractors that have been involved. And we're still hoping that that artwork will be saved and given to the town. We've been working on it. Okay? Now, moving on, past the Rotary was the nurses' home. The nurses' home actually was built in two different sections. In the later years, doctors lived in it as apartments. Okay, then on the right, built in 1968, was the new nurses' home. About 8 stories high, tallest building in Lakeville, and you can see it from far away. And it was originally built as a nurse's home, but over time there were state agencies that had space in it, and there were college courses taught in that building. I never got into that building, but I mean, I know people that had classes there. Okay, now anybody got any questions or want to make comments about what they remember about Lakeville Hospital? Go ahead.
Just as a suggestion for everyone, that big set of plans sitting there is the Rhino Development's complete plans for the redevelopment of the hospital. And the picture that you see there gives you a good idea of where all the buildings are that Brian was talking about. And later on, we can flip through there and you can see what the proposal is going to be, assuming that the neighbor's lawsuit ends up being dismissed, and they'll be able to go ahead with the permit that the town of Lakeville has authorized to build the distribution center there. But that picture right there, even though it's just black and white photocopy, it's a pretty good idea. It shows you where all the different things are.
Anybody here besides me work there?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Any comments?
I don't know, I liked it there, that everybody was friendly and nice, and, because it was brick when I,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
when I worked there.
yes.
And everyone there called it just the sand, right?
Yes.
The sand.
Oh,
The sand.
yeah.
That's-
Sanatorium.
No one said
Yeah.
sanatorium or hospital, it was the sand.
Yeah, the sand, that's right, yeah.
Right. Somebody's hand?
Yeah, I worked for the Department of Public Health in the nurses building.
Yes,
the town
yes.
Nurses building.
Oh, good.
My grandfather was the head of the people at carpentry, okay, head of carpentry, many, many years ago.
What was
My
the name?
grandfather. Edward Caswell.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Hmm.
Okay. Nancy?
My husband said to mention the fact that the encephalitis field station was headquartered there for the area, and they would go around trapping mosquito. They had mosquito traps that they would collect mosquitoes to see if there was encephalitis, and so that was a testing station at the Lakeville Hospital. And that would have probably been in the 70s, 1970s.
Yes, I know they did that kind of thing. Okay. Jay?
My daughter, when she was going to college, my older daughter, she worked in the kitchen
Yep.
at the Lakeville Sand. And also, when I was preschool, my great-grandmother and I used to get those cards together to send to the sanitarium. And also, when I was in elementary school, I was in Scouts, and we used to go up and put on plays for those children in the wooden building.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, when I was in Scouts, we did that too.
Oh, great. That's good to hear.
My grandfather lived in Connecticut, and he took drafting classes,
Yeah.
and I guess he drafted, I believe it was part of the Children's Hospital. He moved his family up to Lakeville, where they settled, and then he ended up working in the hospital itself.
Very good.
And then my grandmother used to be a volunteer for with the children, and she would go in and bring them socks or whatever. She was always in there with the
Nice.
kids. Yep.
Yes, good story. Okay. Jerry?
When I was working on my master's degree in special ed, learning disabilities, I took a psychology of mental retardation, and part of my coursework was to volunteer. And they set me up tutoring this boy who had cerebral palsy. He was in a wheelchair, but boy was he smart. He knew more than I did about history, and he loved when I came because I could read to him, and then as a motivation, they said take him down to the gym. So I would wheel him down to the gym, and there were all of these teenage boys in wheelchairs playing basketball.
Yes, they did, yeah.
They couldn't use their lower half of their body, but
Right.
they could, shoot the ball and move that wheelchair all around the gym and everything. And then one day, the head nurse said, "Would you like to see the children's ward? This boy that I tutored will take you down to see it." And he took me in, and there was a little 2 or 3-year-old in a crib, banging his head against the side of the crib. And then he took me a little further, and there was a beautiful blonde girl, but she had hydrocephalus. And she was cute. This could be blonde hair, ribbons in her hair. But that made me decide that I couldn't do special ed with those kinds of children. So I just got my degree in learning disabilities,
Okay.
but it was quite an experience. It opened my eyes to the children with their disabilities, the nurses and doctors that were so faithfully helping them, and it kind of changed my life.
Yes. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I would like to mention that the place opened up as a TB hospital. They found a cure for it, or treatment, and all of a sudden there was a polio epidemic in the 1940s or so, and so it was kept open, and they took care of a lot of people with polio, and then somebody came up with treatment for that, and a couple of people, and they converted over to orthopedic surgery and orthopedic care. They had physical therapy units, and they had occupational therapy units, and as a result of the nurse writing the letter for the little boy named Francis X, they ended up they were going to close the whole place way back. But because of all that effort and the need for orthopedic care in the area, and they built the 1964 building, and it was nationally recognized. There were, I think, about 512 employees there, most of them part-time, and it got closed to save money, allegedly. So that's about all I have. Anybody else got anything else?
At the big building, the new building, when the space became available, the regional Department of Environmental Protection had their regional office there.
Right.
I was on the Conservation Commission, and that's where we go. They were there for probably a dozen years.
Yes.
At least. And in that building, there is a part of the cellar has nothing but loose stone in it.
Yes,
And
I
there's-
remember the loose stone.
Right,
yeah.
and there's a well there, and that well was checked daily to indicate in general to the entire state what the water level was in the aquifer that ran through Lakeville and Middleborough.
Didn't know that.
I think it's still there, except I don't think anyone certainly checks it or anything now.
No, no.
Probably somewhere in the, like around 75 through about 85, I was actually teaching computer courses there, when the computers were the little boxes with just
Yes.
the green screen and so forth, and, you know, things took forever to run, but we was teaching it to area teachers, because, you know, we had to get current with what the future was going to be in education, which
Right.
turned out to be obviously computers.
Yes.
And after 85, then the kids were smart enough to teach us, so it worked out well.
Well, yes. Okay. Anybody got any other comments? Okay. Well, I'd like to invite everybody to go up and get refreshments, and there's a raffle, or door prize rather, and you we'll take a break and we'll meet back again in a little while and do a business meeting. We have a few things to bring up. Okay, so that's it for now. Thank you all.